Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Divine Fingerprints podcast. I'm your host, Andy Traker, and excited to welcome one of my former colleagues today, Damon Fleming. Welcome, Damon.
Hey, thank you.
Damon and I taught at Hope together for probably 4 or 5 years together. Damon taught Bible. I'm still in the same position as college counselor and taught personal finance. And so, Damon, just to kind of start off, what was your favorite thing about teaching at Hope and teaching those Bible classes?
My favorite thing about Hope was the community, and and I so missed it when I left. I was so lonely. Gosh, it probably took me 2 years to recover fully. As believers, I don't think we delve into the Old Testament enough, and man, it made me delve. And
Right.
the materials that I was given to use to learn how to delve and to teach the students went really deep into grammar, and then I used one short book called Christian Beliefs. I would finish the year off with that. The 20 things every Christian should know. It's published by Zondervan, and it was really cool to wrap up with that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, even with writing Divine Fingerprints, a good chunk of the quotes that are from the Bible or from the New Testament, but the two stories that I probably use in the most depth are actually Joseph and Esther. So there's still a lot of connection in the Old Testament to, obviously, to everything Jesus had to say and all of that, but even in some of the things that we'll talk about with Divine Fingerprints, which is cool. So Damon, in about 2018, I think it was, you ended up leaving Hope, and part of that was for some health reasons. Go ahead and tell us what you've been dealing with since that point.
I left for financial and for health reasons, but
Okay.
in 2014, I was diagnosed with a disease called multiple myeloma, and it's still kind of a misunderstood disease. There's no cure. They call it a cancer, but it's a blood-borne thing that's sort of related to leukemia or lymphoma.
Okay.
It changed the way it basically changed my immune system. One of the most, that's one of the reasons your book stood out to me so much, is that God uses circumstance. And my circumstances changed, and not in the way that I would have them change, but it drew me closer to Him.
Sure.
Just before I left Hope, I think it was maybe 2 years before I left, or maybe it was the last year, I was invited to go to Ecuador. Someone backed out on a trip.
Okay.
And I was so excited to go. And I went to my little church and told everybody about my opportunity, and everybody prayed, and here's your new missionary and stuff like that. And then I went and got a bunch of vaccines, and one of them almost killed me. I ended up getting whooping cough from the vaccine, and I kind of struggled through it at work, and finally I ended up in the hospital because my heart was slowing down to 20 beats a minute.
Okay.
The coughing, broken ribs, crazy stuff. But I ended up not getting to go to the mission, and getting to go to Ecuador, and feeling like I let myself down and let students down and stuff like that. I cried like a baby several times.
So this was before you really understood what was going on?
Yeah, I didn't really know what I was about to encounter with the disease I had, or I have, and basically that kind of turned everything around as far as work. And 2 years before I left, my pastor's wife, who's a teacher, told me about a position available in Berlin, and it's a super good school. But I didn't want to leave Hope, so I turned it down, and then all that stuff happened. So the next year, another position opened, and she came up to me in church again and said, "Hey, this is." And I thought, I'll just look into it and see what the deal is. And fortunately, most everybody that works there are believers. So I think we're a unique school, which I'm not a part of now because I had to resign for health reasons again.
Right.
But a very unique school in the sense that we don't really we didn't teach religion or anything like that, but everybody was prayerful and intentional
Sure.
in how we did things because of our beliefs.
What are your, let me ask you this way, what are your symptoms, if any, other than the immune challenges that you deal with?
The first stuff was chronic pain and fatigue, and it just wore on me. I loved my little classroom out there at Hope. I thought it was the best place on campus. I get to see the kids, and I always greeted the students. I'd get out between classes and stuff like that, and just get to see the action. But I just sometimes on my lunch hour, I would literally go to my car and try and take a nap because I just didn't feel like I could make it.
Couldn't get through a day.
And then I was more prone to getting colds and viruses and stuff like that. Fatigue, a little bit of brain fog.
Okay. Did that get steadily worse over time, or has this kind of been a steady problem for a while?
It's a steady problem, and the weird thing is they measure different factors in your blood, and so I was basically in a smoldering stage until just recently, till about a year ago. And when you pass the smoldering stage, then your body starts doing different things. Essentially, what happens is you get a mean little group of antibodies that kind of run amok, and instead of doing their job and attacking stuff that comes into your body, they start attacking your body internally.
Okay.
And you can get bone lesions and kidney failure, all kinds of weird stuff.
Right.
And
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any kind of good autoimmune disease. I've dealt with chronic hives for at least probably 12, maybe, I don't know if it's 15 years at this point, and it's not as serious as what you've dealt with, but it's just inflammation and obviously the skin rash, and most of the time it's controlled by medication, but there are definitely days when it could be pretty miserable.
I've had hives. I know it's not fun. It's not a fun
No,
thing.
no, I mean, it doesn't have the big ramifications that, kidneys and all of those things, would have in your end, but when the body starts attacking itself, it's pretty miserable, so I feel for you with all of that. That you're going through. So you mentioned that about a year ago you exited the smoldering stage, and I don't think that's a good thing.
No,
Tell us what's happened since then.
I was scheduled to start treatment based on my blood work numbers, and there was no specialist in New Mexico for multiple myeloma, so I was blessed enough to find one. In around 2016, I found one in Arizona through a group. It was a group on Facebook,
Okay.
and everyone insisted that you need a specialist in that, not just an oncologist or a hematologist, but a multiple myeloma specialist. So I tracked one down at Phoenix Mayo Hospital, and he's a good one. He's been really into research, and I just found out while I was out there doing my treatment that he's hard to get right now as far as a doctor because he's doing so much research.
Okay.
But he told me that basically I was a candidate for stem cell transplant. That required doing 4 to 5 months of chemotherapy in Albuquerque to get my blood work to a level that they could harvest stem cells from, and then they harvested stem cells from me, 7 million from me. So I have two little bags I have two different samples of stem cells. Very interesting process. And then I received a chemotherapy that was very aggressive. It's the same chemical basically that they use to treat leukemia. I got a high dose of that to kill my bone marrow, and then I received my own stem cells back that had been sorted.
Okay. So it's not necessarily a bone marrow transplant, but it's
No.
it's
They do
a different procedure for that.
take bone marrow to see where you're at as far as where you're standing in the disease, and I have to go back at the end of July to get another bone marrow biopsy. And I would say for anyone that's ever wondered about giving bone marrow to someone that has leukemia. It's not that big of a deal. It's nothing scary. And I would, knowing what I know, I would give to someone without even thinking about it. But
Sure.
it's a scary thing for someone that doesn't know too.
Right. It sounds like it's probably pretty misunderstood. Giving blood is such a valuable thing as well, and sometimes we're not
Hmm.
as good about that as we could or should be. What is the ultimate goal of the treatment that you're undergoing? Is this something that can eradicate what you have? I think you said it wasn't curable, or is it really just
Yeah.
managing the
The
symptoms?
the goal is long-term remission.
Okay.
Yeah. Or the bad thing about the disease is you get these treatments to keep your numbers down and basically your blood work to keep their protein spikes. You get this treatment to keep them down, but it weakens your immune system even more. And I had some really serious complications after the stem cell. I got a norovirus from somewhere. Norovirus is bad for healthy people. And
Sure.
that led to a problem with I can't remember what they called it, but it messed up my intestines and I ended up getting septic blood.
Oh gosh.
And that led to AFib and led to me being in the hospital for 18 days. But the being in the hospital was such a spiritual thing to be around just the teams that cared for me and their willingness to be prayed for. I was like, I got to pray for these people. They're doing, and I try to do that anytime I get a procedure done or anything. I say, do you guys mind if I pray for you? And I'll pray for wisdom and thank them for their willingness to educate themselves and become medical professionals and use their expertise on me. And I asked, it was crazy how many people were willing to be prayed for. The other thing, when I was first admitted to the hospital, I was in critical care and sort of like a dream. And sometimes I kind of felt out of myself. And I remember talking to God and just saying, God, thank you. And I thank you for my salvation and for loving me and for your grace. And then kind of like reliving my life in my head and asking forgiveness for sin and asking forgiveness for, especially for my failures since I became a firm believer, uh, and have been skeptical when someone says, God told me this or God told me that. I'm like, yeah, right. Like God threw a thunderbolt at you and said, and I just was crying out to Jesus, not in a weeping way, but just like, and I just heard three words. I heard, I'm with you. And I don't know if it came out of my head or if it came out of where it came from, but when I heard those three words,
Right.
it just was so soothing. And after that, I was like, I was very, very sick, but it just helped me relate to the people that were caring for me. And I was able to be, even though I was really sick, I was able to be very positive for them and grateful and not an angry, sick person like I
Sure. Sure.
normally am.
Like yeah, it'd be easy to do that. How many times do you feel like you've come relatively close to dying from this?
That was one thing that caused me to reach out to God in the way I did with my sin and stuff. I could hear them talking in the background about taking me to intensive care. I was in critical care, and I heard them say, "Let's give it a few more hours." And a doctor talking to a nurse or whatever. My blood pressure was really low. I was like 75 over 40. And it was because I was an AFib. And I felt close. I felt like maybe this is it. And I just thought I need to talk to God. And it's cool because it doesn't have to be formal. I didn't have to
Right.
get on my knees. I don't even know if I could have got on my knees. But he was there with me. I'm with you.
So you said a few minutes ago that initially you would have been skeptical to think that God would talk to us so directly, or that, when people say that they've heard from God. Obviously, the book Divine Fingerprints that you've read isn't that exactly, but it's certainly trying to figure out the evidence of where God has been in our lives. The key that's perhaps a little bit different is that in most cases, you're seeing divine fingerprints by looking backwards at things that have
Yes.
already happened and seeing God's evidence. How has reading that during this time of isolation and not being sure that you were going to make it through this even. What perspective has that given you?
Well, I had the first 20 chapters in right before I went in, and I didn't get back to them for I was in the hospital for 18 days. But I really think that's sort of just being in that train of thought and thinking about how he had steered your life or directed you or whatever you want to call it. It's a mystery.
Sure.
It just had me thinking about how he steered my life. And even and I remember in your book, when you weren't even really with him, he still had the rudder on the boat. He was still,
for sure.
Yeah. And I look back at my life, and I remember when I was basically a humanist and bought into what the world was telling me when I was in college, and he was still directing me through life, even though I was rejecting him.
So it would be really easy, given that you've been dealing with this disease for more than 10 years now, and had some close calls and all of that, to be angry at God or to be upset and why me? We have so much of that in our culture of why do I have to deal with these things? How have you leaned on him in a way that's avoided that type of attitude?
Well, truthfully, I went through that. And I actually, when I missed the Ecuador thing, I was like, why did you set me up? You got me all excited to do something, and then you just let this happen to me? I just didn't understand that part of that was him taking care of me. Sure. And him knowing what I needed more than I know what I need.
Have you seen the episode in The Chosen where Jesus and Little John speak?
Yeah, and I love that, by the way. I got to get back to the last. He's about to. I've watched it up to the point to where they're entering Passover.
Okay, yeah. What you just said reminds me of that conversation that Jesus had with Little John, because he's got his own infirmities that he's dealing with, and he was watching everybody else get healed, and he finally asked Jesus, "What's going on? Why am I not healed?" And it's a drawn out, wonderful conversation. Listeners, if you haven't watched that, it's certainly worth the effort. But Jesus basically says, how much more powerful is your testimony because you still believe in me, despite the fact that you've gone through what you've gone through.
Yes.
And sometimes that's perhaps a difficult thing for us to swallow as humans, because it doesn't take away the pain, it doesn't take away all of the challenges that you deal with, but it's also beautiful in that it does give it a purpose. It seems like you've discovered that.
It's weird about that too. For Little John, it was outwardly obvious that he had something going on, and for me, it hasn't. It's something internal, and I think people just look at me as this big old dude, which I am. I'm just a big man, and I didn't really have anything outwardly obvious, other than I'm sure people picked up on me being, really tired or stuff like that. It's obvious now. I look like Coach Scartwood.
Right?
Yeah. He's got a better shine than I do, but
you accept it and enjoy what you got, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So let me finish with one more question kind of on the same idea. You've been basically isolated since you started this treatment, so you can tell us in a second how many days that is. What has that taught you about God and or just the importance of community and other believers?
I'm so lonely for church right now. Well, I talked to the cancer doctor Monday, and he said a minimum of 3 more months before you even start to feel normal. And I have to be careful. It's not so much my T cells now, my white blood cells. It's more my red blood cells are depleted. Everything got killed, and those are the ones that take longer to rebuild. It's just a very lonely feeling to get tugged out of your routine. I loved working, and I had to quit my job. I took family medical leave and all that kind of stuff, and I just ran out of leave. I didn't know it was going to take this long to do, and I ran out of leave about a month before I actually got my stem cell transplant. So just not being around people, not being able to fellowship, that was one cool thing about, I think the greatest thing about the community at Hope was like-minded people that you could go there and be with, and if you ask somebody something, you would get an answer back with a godly perspective. And I think that's been the worst part, is because I don't think I'm like a gregarious, outgoing person, but I love people, and I like to be around them.
Right.
And if you don't have that, well, basically all you really have is God anyway, and He's blessed you with the other things that you have while you're here in this vessel, and you can't imagine what it's going to be like to be in a vessel that's not so messed up, and you're able to be
Right.
with Him.
Right. Yeah,
Something to look forward to.
for sure. As you were talking about that, I would guess most of our listeners are probably thinking the same thing, that we got a small taste of that during COVID when we all had to isolate. And I remember I'm an introvert at heart, and so for the first week or two, I was kind of like, hey, this is kind of nice. I don't have to go into work, and this isn't so bad. I could do this. But we all assumed that it was only going to be a couple of weeks and that we were all going to get back to normal fairly quickly. And that obviously wasn't the case. And depending on what kind of work you did or what circumstances you were dealing with, for some people it lasted months or years.
Yeah.
And so I think as a society, we probably have a little more understanding or sympathy of what you've had to deal with, kind of going through this again, but not fully because of the pain and weakness and fatigue that you're dealing with on top of the isolation. So we certainly will all keep you in prayer and appreciate you sharing some of this. It's appreciate you being vulnerable and kind of going through a story that's not been fun for you, and probably not real easy to tell either.
Yeah, I just got to the point where I could do without crying, actually. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
It was emotional too.
For sure. I mean, especially like you said, you're a big guy and used to being able to probably do whatever you really wanted to physically, and athletic and all of that. You can lose all of that in a fairly short period of time when you can't do what you want to do. I don't even totally understand the science between the blood cells and bone marrow and all of those parts of it, but it has to take a toll.
I need to come visit you guys when I get better. I had a doctor appointment yesterday, and it was over off of Tramway in Alameda is where it was. But I drove by the school just to check out the construction and stuff.
Right, we're getting there.
It's gonna be cool when it's wrapped up.
Your old classroom is long gone at this point.
Yeah, I noticed. I stopped and looked over the fence.
Yeah, well, we look forward to that time when the immune system and everything else is working well enough that you can stop in and say hi, and we'll give you a tour of the new facility when we get to that point.
Perfect. Say hi to everyone.
Will do. Well, thank you, Damon. We appreciate you joining us for the Divine Fingerprints podcast, and thank everyone for listening as well, and hope you'll join us again next time.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless.